I'm Teresa Beanken, CEO of National Speakers Bureau Canada and Global Speakers Agency. We envision that the sharing of ideas inspires action to make the world a better place through bringing you expert speakers and thought leaders for your conferences, training programs, and events, whether they are in person, online, or hybrid. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker. Kendal Netmaker is an award-winning Indigenous entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Niche Gear. He's on a mission to empower and motivate people worldwide by sharing his story that regardless of where you come from and what challenges you face, you have the power to enact change. Kendal speaks professionally to thousands of people worldwide on resilience, leadership, and the power of telling your story. To date, he's founded and invested in 5 businesses, including the Niche Gear, which is a lifestyle apparel brand that gives back a percentage of their profits to go toward funding underprivileged youth to empower them to take part in sports. He's won over 25 business awards, including being named one of Canada's top 40 under 40 and runner-up at the YBI Global Entrepreneur of the Year. From his best-selling book and popular keynote, Driven to Succeed, Kendal shares his ultimate resiliency formula that will motivate attendees to shift your mindset to achieve their ultimate purpose for a successful life. Welcome, Kendal.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you to everyone at the National Speakers Bureau for having me here today with all of you. Dansa, Kendal Netmaker Nitsigason, Nagoatsu Otsinia. I'm from Sweetgrass First Nation, and I'm currently right now streaming to you live from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, to share with you some of the things that have come from this book that we published a few years ago now, to share with you some tips and strategies to overcome life's greatest obstacles. Because I could tell you from my background, the people from my background, the things I'm going to share with you today have been coming from people before me and has been simplified from ancient Indigenous knowledge to mainstream English. And so the things I'm going to share with you, how we would say this in our Cree background, we would say these are teachings. Right. So when we're going to give a teaching point, we call them a teaching. That's how it's translated. So the teachings I'm going to share with you today have come from the people before me and my ancestors, elders, and so on. And everything that's been passed down to me has not been written down how I've written it down in a book. You see, everything we do as Indigenous people has been passed down just like this through oral stories, oral knowledge. And so when we go in and we present tobacco to an elder, what we're doing is we're essentially exchanging that tobacco, which is sacred to us, in exchange for something. You see, one of the things that we do as Indigenous people is we give before we take. That goes for everything. You know, when we're picking medicines, picking sweetgrass, sage, and so on, we're offering that tobacco before we pick some. So I think that's very powerful. And the things I want to share with you today, I want you thinking about where you come from. Everything that has allowed you to be in this Zoom webinar here today. Think of all the obstacles, all the things you've had to overcome just to be in the position that you are today. Because what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes is I'm going to take you on a journey. You see, when I was a kid, many things that I thought were normal weren't so normal to many people out there. When I was about 5 years old, my mother and my father, they obviously had me. They had Kendra, they had Farah, and Marisha. So I'm the oldest in my family. And when I was a kid, one of the things that I thought was normal was couples arguing, you know, parents always having disagreements, shouting at each other. And so one day in particular, it was a hot summer day. And I was living in a place called Big River First Nation. It used to be called Whitefish back in the day. And when I was living in Big River First Nation, my mother and my dad were raising myself, but I rarely saw my dad. You see, he'd be out and about doing his own thing. Now, as a 5-year-old kid, all you're thinking about is, I just want to play. I just want to have a good time with my friends, my cousins, and so on, my sisters, and all that type of stuff. One day in particular, kindergarten had just finished. And I remember I got dropped off at the end of my long gravel driveway. Trees on the left, trees on the right. They feel like they're touching the clouds. That's how tall those spruce trees were up there. And I remember I was walking down that gravel road, washboard style road. And at the end of the driveway, from myself to our house where we had resided, I could see that my mother was in a rush. She was in a panic. And she was grabbing all of these garbage bags, all of these boxes, getting them from inside, putting them back of this pickup truck I had never seen before. And I could see my sister Kendra getting in the back seat, my sister Farah getting in the back seat, my little sister Marisha getting in the back seat. And as I'm getting closer and closer to this pickup truck, I remember seeing that my mother was still rushing. She was in a panic. I could tell she was stressed. And as I got closer, I say, "Hey, Mom, what are you doing?" My mom turns and looks at me as she has a garbage bag in her hand. "Kendall, go inside, pack up your bag. We're going to go somewhere for a while." So me as a child, I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to go inside, grab my stuff. We must be going to Prince Albert, the nearest city that we would go to. And we'd only go there for medical appointments. We never had running transportation back then. So I remember getting my backpack, and at the time it was Ninja Turtles. And I remember Ninja Turtles backpack had all my Ninja Turtles toys, but zipped it up. I went outside, got in the back of the truck. I put my backpack in the back, and I remember getting in the back seat. And we go to Prince Albert, and I'm thinking, maybe we'll go to this place called Walmart, which is a special place for children. You know, they want to go get their toys, and they want to go bug their mother for a treat and so on. But we kept passing Walmart, and we opened into this room. It looked like my studio. It wasn't that big. It had fluorescent lights on the ceiling. And I remember there was a bed right there. There was a bed right there. And we put all of our belongings in there and we stayed there for 1-2 days. Then we went to a different room 1-2 days, and a different room, a different city. And sometimes you are going to have flashbacks to your childhood, flashbacks to a certain event in your life that has shaped the person that you are today. You see, we become shaped by our past experiences. Everything we've learned from a child up into this present moment has shaped the people that we are today. And if we want to change, we want to grow, sometimes we have to go back and visit those certain things in our life and challenge them. Is this serving me? Is this belief about myself, about people, serving me to become the best version of myself and who I want to grow to become? When you want to become a leader, an entrepreneur, you have to challenge certain beliefs about yourself, things that you thought were real. And so as a kid, I remember I had a flashback to that moment. I was a teenager now, and I had a flashback to sitting in that hotel room. I went to my mom one day, said, "Hey, Mom, I remember as a kid, we were sitting in this hotel room. And then I remember all of a sudden, a few days later, we were at our Cookum's house. That's what we say our grandma in Cree. We were at Cookum's house. And she told me, she finished the rest of the story. She said, "Son, when you were 5 years old, I had to make a decision. It was tough. I was in a very abusive relationship with your father. I had to leave when he was out of the reserve one weekend. That's why that pickup truck had come. That was one of my friends picking me up. We went to Prince Albert. We checked into a women's shelter, interval house for mothers who had no place to go with their children. So we were essentially a homeless family bounced around all these women's shelters until one day she says, "You're a Cookum," invited us to go live with her in Sweetgrass, which is another 2 hours west, right past the Battlefords. And so that's where we ended up moving, she said, but right before grade 1 was going to start. So I remember going to our Cookum's house, and she had a nice 1-bedroom home. And so she had her own room. So she made us stay in the living room on this long couch. My mother stayed on the couch. I slept right beside her on the floor. Kendra, Farah, Marisha was a little infant. She stayed with my mother on the couch. So that was home. And little did I know that my Cookum, who didn't even speak much English, would become a driving teacher for myself. You see, we all have role models. We all have mentors, people who have helped shape the people that we are today in the present, good, positive, and so on. And thankfully, my Cookum was a positive influence in myself. You see, one of the things that she would say, and she would really emphasize this, she would say, "Anutsuma, today, Moy Gunta, it's not for nothing. This day we've been given. It's been given to us. You waking up saying that is like, it's like Creator is telling you still have work to do. And as you're going along this path, this road, there's going to be obstacles that will come and try to take you off this path." And she would always say, the best way how you can help yourself, she would say, is to try to eliminate as much negativity in your life as possible as you get older. Sometimes we'll have negative people that will come into our life, they'll come and test us. The more negativity you hear, suddenly you start to talk more negative. You won't realize it until later on. I've been there. I've sat in coffee rooms where the conversation just turns really negative, and it stays there for many coffee breaks and so on. And all of a sudden, I started chiming in. very unhealthy. So she would say that eliminate drugs, alcohol from your life. Try not to engage in that. That will keep you in a spiral, she would say. People, negative events will come and test you along your path. What she would say is the best way for fulfillment in anyone's life is to acknowledge a gift that you have. Gifts. We all have gifts. We have talents and abilities that have been given for us from Creator, she would say. And these gifts that have been given to us, it's up to us to nurture them, to work on them. You know, some of you may be good at accounting. Maybe some of you are good at teaching. Maybe some of you are good at speaking and so on. But it's up to you to find that gift. And sometimes they don't get exposed until something becomes really uncomfortable for us to really explore it. My very first speaking engagement, I fell down the stairs, ladies and gentlemen. It was very embarrassing. But I wouldn't be here speaking if that didn't happen. I wouldn't be here speaking to you if that those notes I had on the podium mic was shuffling all over the microphone, echoing across the gymnasium. I was embarrassed back then. But that needed to happen so that the present can happen. Sometimes life's greatest teachers come in the form of problems, obstacles. Sometimes we get put in a different path because what looks like a problem is actually meant for us to grow, meant for us to experience a new path that's meant for us to take a new road that we're meant to grow on, and so on. You see, the more that we see obstacles, problems as teachers, as opportunities and blessings in disguise, the better our world will become. But it takes a personal mental shift to make that happen. What goes on up here dictates everything out here. So if we want to grow, we have to watch how we think, who we listen to, who we listen to on our phones. I highly recommend all of you who are watching this today, when you're driving, when you're in an airport, if any of you are ever flying again, hopefully soon, or maybe you're commuting to work, instead of listening to music, I want you to do a test for at least 7 days. And I want you to listen to audio programs. I want you to download an app called Audible or audiobooks.com and start listening to audio programs, people teaching live like a seminar like this, and listen to their programs, okay? Listen to them on your headsets while you're going. You'll notice something about your thought patterns. You'll notice something about how you treat people. I started doing this back in 2014. I saw a radical shift in my mentality over the years to come, and I still do this to this day. That's a challenge I have for all of you. If we want to change our positivity, we want to change our optimism, we can do the quickest way we can do that is listening to audio programs on the go. So as my Coco would teach me these things, and I would understand that she was teaching me, one of the things that she also share with me is how to treat people. You see, again, as Indigenous people, we have no manuals. We learn by observing. When we go to ceremonies, okay, and I was just talking to Teresa about when I was just at here 2 weeks ago. When we're at a ceremony, it's not my job to speak. It's my job to listen and to observe. A lot of what we do is we use this. Our main sense in our ceremonies and everything we do is to hear. So we have no choice but to listen and to absorb the environment. The second thing that we do is we use our eyes, but we don't use it a lot because when I stare at people in our culture, it's very disrespectful. So when you see an Indigenous person in our workplaces and you wonder why they're not making eye contact, there's a teaching moment there. In our culture, if I'm staring at you, it's very disrespectful. And a lot of people across the country have a hard time understanding that. So my kukum would force me to watch and listen to her. And so I'd watch the way she would treat people, how she would overcome obstacles and so on. And it was always from a place of love, of loving everyone in her path. And so one of the things that she would share with me is the ability to forgive on the fly. I would write that down if I were you. The ability to forgive on the fly. People would come off the reserve road and they would come visit her. And I used to sit there as a kid, even at 6, 7 years old, wondering, why does she put up with that? Why does she put up with this? Why does she just let people come in? Sometimes they're intoxicated. Sometimes they're not, 100% up here. Why does she do that? She would feed them. She would give them tea and so on. And I used to wonder, why would she do that? Little did I know she was teaching me something. She wouldn't look at the person and where they come from, what they were going through. She would see them for who they were, who they are. And she had this ability to forgive people on the fly. She wouldn't take it personal. And I thought that was so powerful in how we treat people, how we treat our workplaces, our family members, and so on. Another thing I want to share with you is when we're growing, when we're taken from where we are to where we want to go in your workplaces right now, sometimes there's going to be times where you're going to have a really challenging moment in your personal life that's going to affect your workplaces. I highly suggest that if you find yourself in a rut like that, go back and see what's happening at home. Usually what happens at home reflects on everything else in our life. Happy at home is happy at work. So that goes to our closest relations and who we're closest to, whether you're married, you have a husband, a wife, and so on, or you have a spouse, or you have a friend, or whatever that might be. That relation to that closest people that you're with dictates a lot of how your worldview becomes. Very important stuff. And so as a kid growing up through this, my kukam would do everything she can to teach me by observing, by watching. By the time I was in grade 5, I had a helping hand, and it was a kid from South Africa. By this time, I was going to a nearby school called Cutknife. In Cutknife, I was one of the few Indigenous kids and First Nations kids in the school. So it was I went through that culture shock. I had to observe, just like as a kid growing up in ceremony, how people talk, why they talk, like what they talk about, how they dress, their accents, and so on. So I'd sit there the first couple of days just observing. By about the third day of school, I remember I had the confidence to go up to these kids at recess because I like to play sports. And I remember going up to them and I started kicking this ball back and forth. And this kid, his name was Johan. He was the only kid out of this whole school to really become best friends with me. He was the only kid to ask me why I wasn't playing soccer after school. He was the only kid to offer a helping hand. Him and his family drove me to games and practices, back and forth to Sweetgrass, out of their way. Paid for my soccer fee. That happened for 2 years. 2 years later, by the time I was in grade 7, Johan and his family gave my mother and myself, my sisters, a 1986 Ford Crown Victoria, burgundy red, because they saw something in us. They saw a family that was trying. And because we were growing up in situations that weren't ideal to us, we never had transportation. We grew up on welfare. Our normal was collecting cans and bottles. Our normal was relying on that welfare check. Our normal was pawning my bike, my little Super Nintendo every 2 weeks. And just to make sure we had lunch and make sure that we were clothed and so on. That was normal to us. And there was a family that decided that they were going to take a helping hand, give a helping hand. And they gave me not only rides, but an opportunity to play sport, but also a vehicle so my mom could continue that because they are moving to the city. So now I'm in high school, I'm playing more sports as a result of that helping hand and many more helping hands to come. The act of generosity, helping one another, regardless of where they come from, what they've gone through, allowed me to go from that moment to graduating high school, to going to play college volleyball, to coming back to Saskatoon, completing 2 degrees, not even in business. But my last year of university, I entered these business competitions to create a clothing brand that would help kids the way that I grew up. How can I help youth, Indigenous youth, to take part in the sports? How can I help fund them in some way? So I thought in each year to create a clothing company that would give a portion of profits every year to helping kids that are growing up in the same situation. And little did we know that I had to write a business plan. I had to do like Dragon's Den style pitches. I went to all these competitions. You know what? I did something that many people weren't doing. I kept telling a story. Super powerful. That story would get told over and over again, kind of like how I'm telling this story right now. And that's how we grew it from a 1-bedroom apartment to a kiosk, to an office, to multiple stores, to having it in other retail outlets, to creating an e-commerce store, to becoming a speaker, to writing Driven to Succeed, having the whole thing in this book now, creating an online course, coaching other business owners, other leaders, and so on, creating consulting programs and so on, and led me to here today, ladies and gentlemen. I know when we have 10 more minutes here, but I wanted to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm more than happy to have answer any questions right now. So Teresa, back to you. Is there any questions that we can answer today?
Thank you, Kendal. I will take a look at the Q&A section in the chat and really appreciate your combination of a personal approach as well as bringing in your family and business experiences. So a well-rounded perspective. Thank you. Okay. We have a couple of questions coming in. Feel free to add them to the Q&A section here. We have a question from Sophia. referencing when you spoke about listening, and she says, do you have any recommendations on what or who we should listen to specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say two people you should listen to. If you're looking for motivation, Les Brown is awesome. Les Brown. If you're looking for motivation / leadership and all the other stuff, Zig Ziglar, he passed away in 2012. Bob Proctor is another good one. Jack Canfield is another good one. Obviously Tony Robbins, another good one. You know, there's many people. I'm happy to answer more. If you just want to message me, I can give you a even more in-depth list if you'd like. Maybe reach out to Teresa and the team. They can give you my contact and whatnot.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, a lot of the classics with strong foundations in those examples. We have another question about your mindset about giving before taking, and someone's asking about an example of the way that you could incorporate more give before take technique in the workplace.
That's going to come from leadership, right? So in our culture, the elders, what we say long ago, kayas, that's how they say it in our language, they would establish that a long time ago. And so over time, that becomes expected of people, so to speak. So if we're adapting that to the workplace, it almost has to become like written down from the team member, whoever the leader of your organization is, the CEO, the president, and so on. That has to be written, and it has to be explained to every team member, and everyone has to be in agreement with that. And so once that's established, then it becomes almost like a rule within the workplace, the organization. So that's how I would, if you're looking to create that give and take, it's kind of like, for example, you know, the person who is always demanding, right? And we all know people that are very, like, they just want to demand. Well, it's okay to be like that, because we all need people that are like that. But why not create a rule? Like, if you're going to ask for something, why not give something first? Why not give a compliment first of something, a past behavior, a past job completed? That could be very powerful.
Thank you. Great examples of ways to think about that and action it in the workplace. We have another question about culture in the workplace, and specifically it says, you may have dealt with bias or misunderstanding about your culture in business. How do you address that in the business world?
I'm going to be very blunt. They need more people like myself who are living in two worlds. So the reason I'm speaking today, ladies and gentlemen, is because I'm not just a First Nations face in the mainstream being successful. I live in the other world too, which is our cultural realm. Back home, I was just telling Teresa, I'm there every week, right? Doing things back home in our ceremonies, you know, sweat. Next weekend, I have to go and participate in a Sundance. You know, we're fasting, and you can't drink, you can't eat, you're dancing for those days. So that's the perspective I bring to not only the business mainstream world, but also to give people understanding on how our people operate in this country, how our people are different. You see, one of the things that creates a lot of ignorance and bias is the simple way I can explain this: lack of understanding between the two worlds. See, First Nations people call them, this is my right hand, right? So First Nations people here, we've been forced to understand everything that's happened in this country about everyone else. Like, the vice versa isn't the same where non-Indigenous people have been learning about our people. So all it creates is assumptions, which creates ignorance. And the assumptions are passed on from generation to generation. The only way to resolve this, ladies and gentlemen, is to fast track. You need people like myself to come and educate, because the school systems are now just starting to do this in the last 5 years to implement this, like almost forced education, but it's going to take a long time to close that gap. In our workplaces, in our campuses, our organizations, and so on, our businesses, the leadership has to take it upon themselves to give meaningful education and understand each other's story. If we don't understand each other's story, we are going to create more assumptions. And I could tell you this, I'll give you one example. I was in the cab about a year and a half ago, and the cab driver was telling me, you know, they're being very ignorant, I guess, like, towards my people. This is just being open. And I said, where'd you learn all this? Did you ever learn from a First Nations person? What do you think he said? No. So it's not coming from us. that's coming from everyone else. It creates, unfortunately, negativity. So we need to start dialoguing together. We need to start inviting each other to things. It's kind of like, be a good neighbor. We can't be a good neighbor unless we're it's a win-win. So I hope that makes sense there, Teresa. I hope that makes sense to everyone who's been here. Feel free to contact me. NSB has all my contact. I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. I'm here to try to make this world a better place and meaningful and work together. That's the goal here today. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Do you have time for a few more questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, good. And I think it is so important when you're speaking about learning from experience. And I know, there's reference to a learning opportunity, certainly with the 215 children in BC. So it's
yeah, that's tough. Like my mushum, my mother's father went through those residential schools. My cookum, my mother's mom, when those residential school wagons were coming to forcibly take children from their home, my cookum had to go hide in the bush and her other siblings would get taken. And so like that hurts even thinking about that, and that hurts even thinking about what if my cookum went, who became my teacher I talk about, I probably wouldn't be speaking today about this stuff. I wouldn't be here speaking about the cultural insights about our people. I'd be a different person, I could tell you that. And I'm really grateful she was able to keep her language, her culture, and I'm just the next. I'm an extension of that, so to speak. So I'm just grateful.
Right. Thank you. Yes, your voice is needed for sure. We have a question from Mark. Speaking about challenging times, do you have those moments when you want to just give up, and how do you push through it?
Man, there's many times it's tougher in the beginning with anyone who's starting a new position, getting into a new role. That's when our confidence is are at our lowest, so to speak, in a lot of things. So during that time, you have to make sure that your home life is very secure. Your foundation, that's your foundation, right? Your relationship with your partner, your children, if you have children, grandkids, or whoever you're living with. Try to make sure that that foundation is solid, because there's going to be times when you're going to feel like you want to quit something, where you want to throw in the towel. And it's very important to have that foundation so you can go back and have a safe space to talk about this stuff, because sometimes we don't have friends to talk about this stuff. We don't have a support team to talk about this stuff. I have coaching clients that come to me for this type of stuff, and we get on calls and talk. So because they don't have people like that to talk about. I tell people, if you're going through stuff, do everything you can to talk about someone that you trust, that you feel will be able to give you good advice and so on. Like I've gone as far as getting counseling for myself, because I had to work on things like daddy issues. I didn't grow up with a dad. How do I become a dad for my children, right? And so there's a lot of things like that. Like I really feel one of the things that's lacking in this world is the ability to dialogue effectively, because of, unfortunately, smartphones has taken our ability to dialogue. And so we need to start doing this more, because that is one of the ways we heal ourselves, is through talking, even writing things out. So I hope that's been helpful.
Thank you. Yes, and I think it touches on a couple of the other questions that have come in about even differentiating between things that maybe you should change about yourself versus accepting those things that make you you. Jesse's asked about that, and then another question about motivating yourself to move past challenging times. So your message is resonating for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.